There is a certain kind of person who walks into a room and already knows something is off. Not because anyone said anything, not because there was a fight or a scene or some obvious tension in the air. Just something. A glance that lasted half a second too long. A smile that was slightly too wide. A sentence that sounded completely normal but carried a different energy underneath it. And their brain caught all of it, instantly, without even trying. Most people would walk right past those signals and never notice a thing. But this person noticed. This person always notices. You would think that kind of awareness would feel like a superpower. And sometimes, for a moment, it does. But here is what nobody talks about. That same awareness does not come with an off switch. It follows them home. It replays the room. It picks apart the glance, the smile, the sentence, and builds entire theories out of details that most people never even registered. One small silence becomes a question. One question becomes a spiral. One spiral becomes an hour of lying awake at night, wondering what something meant that probably meant nothing at all. If you know someone like this, or if you are someone like this, you already understand that this kind of awareness is not a gift you can simply set down at the end of the day. It is something you carry, constantly, even when you are exhausted. Even when you would give anything to just be present, without your brain quietly running commentary in the background. There is a reason some people end up this way, and it is not because something went wrong with them. For some people, this sensitivity came wired in from the beginning. Researchers call them highly sensitive persons, people whose nervous systems process the world at a much finer resolution than most. They do not choose to notice more. Their system simply does not filter the way other people's systems do. For others, it was not something they were born with, it was something they learned. Imagine growing up in a house where the emotional temperature changed without warning, where the energy in the room could shift completely depending on someone else's mood that day. A child in that environment learns very quickly that paying close attention is not optional, it is survival. They learn to read the sound of footsteps in the hallway, to measure the silence between sentences, to know, before anyone says a word, whether tonight is going to be okay or not. Their nervous system builds an internal radar system, and it builds it not out of curiosity, but out of necessity. The brain remembers, the body remembers, and what once kept them safe becomes a habit so deep it no longer feels like a habit at all. It just feels like who they are. So when that person grows up and walks into an ordinary room full of ordinary people, that radar is still running. It never really stopped. You have probably noticed this if you live with this kind of awareness. Conversations are never just conversations. Someone sends a short reply, and you feel the temperature of it immediately. A coworker passes by without saying good morning, and your brain has already generated 3 possible explanations before you reach your desk. It is not paranoia. It is pattern recognition that was trained so early and so thoroughly that it now runs automatically, even in situations that are perfectly safe. And the exhausting part is not the awareness itself. The exhausting part is that it never pauses. Half of you is in the room, holding your coffee, laughing at the right moments, participating in everything the way you are supposed to. The other half is somewhere else entirely, taking notes, cross-referencing details, quietly running the footage again just to make sure you did not miss anything important. At the end of a day that looked completely normal from the outside, you come home and feel like you ran a marathon you cannot explain to anyone. Because how do you explain that listening to people is tiring, not because you do not care, but because you care so much that you absorb everything? The words, the feeling behind the words, the thing they almost said but did not. That absorption goes both directions. Inward, it creates a kind of relentless self-monitoring that most people never experience. You do not just feel an emotion, you immediately analyze it. You do not just feel sad, you interrogate the sadness. You question whether the sadness is even valid. You feel guilty for feeling it, and then you feel something about the guilt. There is a version of this that happens in social situations that is almost unbearable in how familiar it is. You are at a dinner with people you genuinely like. Someone says something funny and you laugh, and then, almost immediately, a part of your brain floats back and watches the laugh from a distance. Was that too loud? Did that sound real? Did anyone else notice? You were just there, and then you were watching yourself be there. People rarely talk about how lonely that feels, and the awareness does not stop at yourself. It extends outward, into everyone around you. You walk into a room and you do not just see people, you feel the dynamic between them. The quiet friction between two coworkers who have not resolved something. The person at the table who is performing happiness for the group but is not actually feeling it. You absorb that. You take it on. Sometimes, without realizing it is even happening, someone near you is anxious and your own chest tightens. Someone is grieving and you carry a version of that grief home with you, even if it is not yours. You become the person people come to when they need to feel understood, because you genuinely understand them. You are good at this. You know you are good at this. But there is a cost. At the end of all that understanding, there is often very little left over for yourself. And somewhere underneath all of it, underneath the awareness and the analysis and the quiet monitoring of everything, is something that rarely gets named out loud. Control, not control over other people. Something quieter than that. The belief that if you can just understand everything well enough, you can protect yourself from being surprised by pain. If you see the disappointment coming, maybe it will not hit as hard. If you read the room correctly, maybe nothing will catch you off guard. If you analyze the relationship carefully enough, maybe you can predict when something is about to go wrong and brace for it before it does. So the mind runs simulations. It rehearses conversations that have not happened. It maps out outcomes that may never arrive. It prepares. And in preparing for a future that may never come, something quietly gets lost. The present moment, happening right now. That keeps getting skipped over while the brain is busy running the next scenario. Here is what is worth understanding about all of this. The person who lives this way is not broken. They are not weak. They are not too sensitive in the dismissive way that phrase usually gets used. They are someone whose system learned to do a very specific thing, pay close attention, stay alert, see what others miss, and then never quite got the signal that it was safe to rest. The awareness itself is not the problem. What becomes the problem is carrying every signal as if every signal requires a response. Not every short reply is a hidden message. Not every quiet moment in a conversation means something has shifted. Not every emotion that surfaces needs to be solved before it is allowed to exist. Some things can simply be noticed and then left alone. That is not a natural thing for a hyper-aware mind. It takes practice. It takes the deliberate, sometimes uncomfortable act of observing something and consciously choosing not to follow it. But when it starts to happen, when the awareness begins to soften just slightly at the edges, something changes. The world does not become simpler. People do not become easier to read. The sensitivity does not disappear, but the weight of it shifts. Instead of using awareness to predict every possible outcome, it becomes something else. A way of being genuinely present, of seeing people clearly and still choosing warmth, of noticing the layers without needing to solve them. The light does not turn off. It just becomes something you hold differently. Not a laser pointed at everything that could go wrong, but something quieter, steadier, warm enough to understand the people around you, and gentle enough to finally turn some of that understanding back toward yourself. If this is you, if any part of this felt familiar in that specific, slightly uncomfortable way, then you already know what it means to think this deeply. And thinking this deeply, feeling this much, noticing this much, that is not something that needs to be fixed. It just needs to be understood.